My name is Ella Allgood, and I'm 35 years old. My parents called me the dropout, the lazy one, the failure. Those weren't words whispered behind closed doors. They were announced at dinner tables, at family reunions, at Sunday gatherings where my aunts passed around plates of food and my mother passed around her disappointment like it was something to be proud of. For a decade, I never corrected a single cousin who repeated those words back to me. Not one. I just smiled, nodded, and went back to the life I was quietly building, the one nobody in that house believed was real. I was 17 when I left college the first time. Not because I was lazy. Not because I didn't care. I left because my father had just lost his job, the electricity in our house had been cut off twice in 3 months, and my younger sister, Nora, needed her medication that cost more than my mother made in a week of double shifts. I made the decision alone, in the dark, sitting on the edge of my bed with a flashlight and a notebook, calculating what I could do and what I couldn't. College wasn't in the numbers. So I left. I told my parents it was temporary. They heard permanent. They chose to hear permanent. What followed was a version of my life that looked like failure from the outside, but felt, from the inside, like the most disciplined years I would ever live. I worked 3 jobs simultaneously during my gap period, a hospital cafeteria during the day, a medical supply warehouse in the evenings, and on weekends I volunteered at a free clinic downtown where Dr. Patricia Howe first looked at me across a patient's bed and said, "You have good hands. You notice things other people miss." I held on to those words like they were currency. I spent them carefully over years on the nights when I almost gave up. I reapplied to university at 20. Full scholarship, based on merit, and a personal essay that my writing professor later told me made her cry on her lunch break. I didn't tell my parents right away. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I had learned, slowly and painfully, that their approval was not oxygen. I could live without it. I had been living without it. Medical school came next, and then residency, and then the kind of surgical specialization that requires you to forget what sleep feels like for approximately 4 years. I became a trauma surgeon. Then I moved into cardiothoracic surgery. I operated on hearts, literally, physically, with my hands, while my family back home still referred to me at Christmas as the one who dropped out. My cousin Priya once said it in front of her children, casually, the way you might mention someone who'd made a minor embarrassing mistake years ago. I was 31 years old and had just completed a 17-hour surgery that saved a 64-year-old grandfather's life. I smiled at Priya. I said nothing. That was the pattern. That was always the pattern. I said nothing. Not out of weakness. Please understand that, but because I had made a choice early on that I would let my work speak, and I would not waste the energy of my voice on people who had already decided what I was. Energy is finite. Mine belonged to my patients. By 34, I had been appointed the youngest chief surgeon at Meridian General Hospital in our city. The announcement ran internally first, then through a hospital press release, and then, apparently, it caught the attention of a local journalist named Faye Corbin who had been doing a feature series on women breaking barriers in medicine. She interviewed me on a Thursday afternoon in my office. It was a good conversation, honest, direct, nothing performative. I told her about the gap year. I told her about the cafeteria job. I told her about Dr. Howe and the flashlight and the notebook. I did not mention my family by name. I didn't need to. The story stood without them. The segment aired on a Tuesday. 6:47 in the evening, Channel 9 News. I didn't watch it live. I was finishing rounds, checking on a post-op patient named Mr. Castellano who had come through a double bypass the previous morning and was now, against all odds, asking the nurse if he could have real coffee. I told him absolutely not, and he laughed, and that was the moment right there, standing in a hospital corridor under fluorescent lights, laughing with a man whose heart I had held in my hands 24 hours earlier. That was the moment my phone started vibrating in my coat pocket. Then one random Tuesday, 6:07 p.m., the family group chat lit up. My mother sent the first message. Just 4 words, Channel 9. Now, please. My aunt followed with 3 exclamation points. Then my cousin Priya. Then my uncle Raymond, who had called me a dreamer at my grandfather's funeral and meant it as an insult. All of them, suddenly, urgently, pointing at a television screen. My mom turned it on and dropped the remote. The cheering under my name said, Dr. Ella Allgood, Chief Surgeon, Meridian General. The woman who rebuilt herself. My phone rang. It was my mother. She was crying before I even said hello. Not the gentle kind of crying. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and complicated, the kind that carries years inside it. I stood in that hallway, and I listened to her cry, and I felt something shift in my chest, not forgiveness, not yet, but the beginning of a door I hadn't known was still closed. I let her finish. Then I said, quietly, I have to check on my patients, Mom. I'll call you tonight. And I went back to work. I called my mother that night at 11:43, sitting in my car in the hospital parking structure, still in my scrubs, eating a granola bar because it was the first thing I had consumed since 6 in the morning. That was the reality of my life that no television segment could fully capture: the cold food, the missed dinners, the birthdays acknowledged through text messages sent between surgeries. I had built something extraordinary, yes, but I had paid for it in the currency that nobody talks about publicly. Time. Presence. The ordinary moments that quietly add up to a life outside of work. I had traded most of those willingly because the work mattered. Because people lived because of the work. But on nights like that one, sitting alone in a concrete parking structure with a granola bar and a phone full of unread messages, the weight of that trade was something I felt in my bones. My mother answered on the first ring. She had clearly been waiting. Her voice was different from the crying version I had heard earlier. It was careful now, the way people sound when they have rehearsed something and are hoping it comes out right. She told me she had watched the segment 3 times. She told me the cheering under my name, Chief Surgeon, had made my father go very quiet in his armchair in a way she had never seen before. She told me my aunt had called 4 relatives to share the news, and that Priya had posted something on social media about being proud of family, which I found deeply ironic, but did not say so. My mother talked for a long time. I listened. And then she said the thing I had been waiting, without realizing it, to hear for nearly 2 decades. She said, I think we didn't understand what you were doing. I think we got it wrong. 7 words. I think we got it wrong. They were not the most eloquent words ever spoken. They were not a grand apology delivered with tears and ceremony. But they were real, and they were hers, and they cost her something to say. I could hear it in the slight break at the end, the way her voice went careful again, waiting to see what I would do with them. I sat with those words for a moment in the dark of the parking structure. Then I said, I know, Mom. Not it's okay. Not don't worry about it. Just acknowledgement. Just truth meeting truth across a phone line at midnight. What I did not tell her, then, was the fuller story of what the segment had set in motion professionally. Because the night it aired, 3 things happened that changed the trajectory of my career in ways I was still processing. First, Dr. Harlan Voss, the chief of medicine at a nationally ranked hospital 2 states over, sent me a direct message through the hospital's professional network asking if I would be open to a conversation about a joint research position they were developing in cardiac trauma innovation. Second, a medical journal editor reached out about contributing to a piece on women in surgical leadership. And third, and this was the one that kept me awake long after I had finished the granola bar and driven home, a 17-year-old girl named Sophia Reyes had watched the segment with her mother in their apartment across the city. Sophia had left school 6 months earlier to help support her family after her father's accident. Her mother had found Meridian General's website, found my name, found my contact form, and written me a 3-paragraph message at 9:30 that night explaining her daughter's situation and asking if I had any advice for a young woman who felt like her future had been taken from her before it started. I read that message 4 times. Then I wrote back. Not a short reply, a real one. I told Sophia that leaving school is not the same as leaving your future. I told her about the cafeteria job and the warehouse and the volunteer clinic. I told her about Dr. Howe and the flashlight and the notebook. I told her that the years that look like nothing from the outside are often the years that build everything. I told her to write down what she wanted, not what seemed possible, but what she actually wanted, and to work backward from that point with honesty and stubbornness in equal measure. I told her my door was open. Sophia came to the hospital 3 weeks later. She sat across from me in my office, this small, serious-faced young woman with a notebook already open on her lap. And she asked me questions for 45 minutes that were sharper and more focused than questions I had received from medical residents twice her age. I connected her with a re-enrollment counselor, a scholarship program, and a hospital volunteer pathway that would let her begin building relevant experience while she finished school. She sent me an update 8 months later. She had re-enrolled. She had been accepted into a pre-medicine mentorship track. She signed the message, "Because of the Chiron under your name, I decided to write mine." I printed that message and kept it in my desk drawer. On the hard days, and there are always hard days in this work, days when the outcomes are not what you fought for, days when the weight of responsibility presses down in ways that have no easy relief on those days, I opened that drawer. I read Sophia's words. And I remember why the decade of silence was worth it. Not for the Channel 9 segment. Not for the title. Not even entirely for my mother's 7 words of reckoning. But for this, the proof that a life built quietly, stubbornly, against the current of other people's low expectations does not just save itself. It reaches back. It pulls someone else forward. My parents called me the dropout. The lazy one. The failure. For a decade, I never corrected a single cousin. I didn't need to. I was too busy becoming the person whose name would one day appear under the words chief surgeon on a television screen that my mother would watch 3 times, and my father would go very quiet watching in his armchair on a random Tuesday evening at 6:47. I am Dr. Ella Allgood. I am 35 years old. And I am only getting started.